Yes, this is YouTube. Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well out there. Well, after my last video received a bit of a controversial thing in the comments, I've decided to make it up to some of you by acknowledging a subscriber request, which I was meant to do when I first started this channel, but I just never got around to it. But I'm hoping to rectify that now, and I'm going to talk about my top 10 Doctor Who episodes from 2005 onwards. So the new series, basically, of course. And of course, before I start my top 10, I'm going to have some honourable mentions and obviously talk a little bit about them and give them verdicts before I start my main top 10. Now, before I carry on, I will explain that some episodes in the honourable mentions and top 10s are two-parters, but I've included both episodes as one story. So, I hope that's okay with you guys, and if it's not, well, then you know where the door is. Anyway, here we go with my honourable mentions first. Okay, starting with, from Season 4, Midnight. This was my favourite episode of the season, featured some brilliant acting, and the way how they managed to get David Tennant and the actress playing the alien that possessed her, I cannot remember her name, you'll have to tell me what it is in the comments, to say the lines of dialogue at the same time was just amazing to see. And I'm going to have to give this episode a full 9.5 out of 10. Just thoroughly enjoyed it. Really worth watching if you get the chance. Next one in my honourable mentions list is A Good Man Goes to War. This episode wrapped up the the first half of season 6, and finally revealed who River Song actually was. And I don't think at the time anyone was expecting that. And it was just a really good episode as well, in my opinion. And I think I'd have to give that one probably a 7 out of 10. And the next one on my list for honourable mentions is School Reunion from Season 2. This featured the return of Sarah Jane and, managed to bridge the gap between the classic series and the new. And it also featured one of the best British actors that we have over here, Anthony Stewart Head, who you might recognise played Giles in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So to see two of my favourite TV shows, Doctor Who and Buffy, in a way, cross worlds, it was nice to see that in this episode. And as a verdict, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. And on the next episode is A Christmas Carol. This was Matt Smith's first Christmas special, and it really paid off, in my opinion. They got Catherine Jenkins in, and some really class acting in this one. And my final verdict on it is an 8 out of 10. And the next one is The Doctor's Wife. Was a really interesting episode to finally see the TARDIS embodied in a woman, and to see how the Doctor bounced off her and clicked with her. And it was also a nice trip to see all the past TARDISes up to that point. And as you can see, there's a poster falling on my head, but we'll ignore that. Anyway, the next honourable mentions is a two-parter from Season 2, Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, which was a really good two-parter in my opinion. And, it was obviously Billie Piper's last 2 episodes as well, and it was just a really emotional ending, the way how she left at the time as Rose Tyler. So for both of them, I'm going to give them both a 10 out of 10. The next episode in my honourable mentions list is Voyage of the Damned. This was the episode that finally made me forget about Christopher Eccleston being my favourite Doctor at the time when I first saw this, and made David Tennant my favourite Doctor because of the way he just took control in the role and was really damn good at it. So I've got to give that episode a 9 out of 10. And now coming up to the last 2 in my honourable mentions list. My first one is Victory of the Daleks. this episode for me solidified Matt Smith as my second favourite Doctor, and it just shows that how dark that his Doctor could go, as well as being light and funny. And in my opinion, Mark Gatiss is an absolutely talented writer, and if he gets the chance to, I think in my opinion, I think he should take over from Stephen Moffat once Stephen Moffat wants to leave Doctor Who and give it to someone else. And I can't do an honourable mentions list without mentioning the last episode from Christmas, The Time of the Doctor. This was a brilliant send-off for Matt Smith. It had its problems, yes, even I'll admit that. But it was really good to see this kind of, camaraderie between Matt Smith and Jenna Coleman, as it was their last episode together. And you really got to go on this brilliant trip before the new Doctor, Peter Capaldi, was introduced, which in my opinion has to be the best new introduction a Doctor's got in the newest series. So as a final verdict, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. And now we move on to the top 10. Right, at number 10 I have Rose. Now, I can't really start a top 10 without this episode because it introduced Doctor Who to a whole new audience, myself included, and got us all hooked on the show, which was really well done in my opinion. And it featured a brilliant debut from Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, who, like I said, because he was the first Doctor I ever saw, he was my favourite at the time. So it took me a while to warm up to David Tennant when he eventually came along, but this was a brilliant first episode. I still enjoy watching it now whenever what I call binge watch the series, like from the very first episode of the new series up to whichever one it's at now. And as a final verdict, I'm going to give this episode, with no pun intended, a 10 out of 10. At number 9, I have the season finale of season 1, which is the two-parter, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways, beg your pardon. This was Christopher Eccleston's last 2 episodes as the Doctor, as unfortunately he only decided to stay on for 1 season. But the way how he went out with a smile was fantastically done, and he explained the process of regeneration perfectly before he actually changed into David Tennant. So as a final verdict, I'm going to give those 2 episodes a 9 out of 10. And on to my next one, which is at number 8, The 11th Hour. This is where Matt Smith bursted onto the scene, literally hanging out of the TARDIS. And he got a brilliant first episode, even though some parts were still a bit sketchy, having the Doctor just regenerated and, he's still trying to get used to this new body. It was perfectly done, and Stephen Moffat showed that at the time the show was in safe hands. And so as a final verdict, I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. And at number 7, I have, in my opinion, the best episode of season 6, The Girl Who Waited. In this episode, we get to see where the Doctor takes Amy and Rory to the planet Apalachia, but things don't quite go so right, and the Doctor and Rory have to save Amy, but a sacrifice has to be made. And for me, that was brilliantly written, brilliantly acted, and brilliantly shown as well. So I'm going to give that episode a 9 out of 10. And at number 6, I have The Christmas Invasion. This was David Tennant's debut episode. Even though he spent half the episode asleep, he showed that he was going to be a fantastic Doctor, and has gone on to become the best one to ever be out of the lot. And so there's nothing else to give this episode except a 10 out of 10. Now at number 5 is the most emotional, one of the most emotional episodes on my list in my opinion, and it's a recent one as well, from season 7, The Angels Take Manhattan. This, of course, is Amy and Rory's last episode, and it's a brilliant, fantastic, amazing episode for them to go out on. And, if you have a handkerchief spare, if you've grown to like these characters over the course of their 3 years on the show, or 2.5 if you want to be pedantic, there's nothing else to give this episode but a full 10 out of 10. Right then, and at number 4 is the, again I'm cheating here a little by including The End of Time parts 1 and 2. This was David Tennant's last 2 episodes as his Doctor, and he went out with style. I don't agree with what the last line was of "I don't want to go," but the regeneration itself was so emotional and so well done, and sadly it was Russell T Davies's last episode writing as well, right up to the moment when Matt Smith appeared, and it was just a fantastic send-off for him. So of course I'm going to give it nothing else but give both episodes nothing else but a full 10 out of 10. And at number 3 I have The Name of the Doctor, the season 7 finale. This was Matt Smith's best performance as the Doctor, in my opinion, and it's a shame because the timing could not have been any worse, because shortly after the airing of this episode, a couple of months later, he announced he was leaving, which was a real shame because he'd only just become, in my opinion, he'd really, given his best, showed all the elements of his Doctor, and it was a shame that, he announced he was moving on. But I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10. And now at number 2, I have another two-parter, which was the season 4 finale, and this two-parter was my favourite overall story of the new series up until my number 1, and that of course is The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. This wrapped up the first 4 years perfectly with these 2 episodes, and it was nice to see a lot of returning characters with Martha Jones, Captain Jack Harkness, Rose Tyler, Jackie Tyler, and of course Mickey as well, and Sarah Jane, and Harriet Jones, the former Prime Minister, with a recurring joke of "Yes, we know who you are." And it was brilliantly done, and Journey's End wrapped up the first 4 years perfectly and set the tone perfectly for the upcoming specials, which would start wrapping up David Tennant's era and Russell T Davies's, and start setting things up for season 5. So of course I'm going to give these 2 episodes a 10 out of 10. And now, before I give you my number 1, I'm going to have a quick recap. At number 10, Rose. At number 9, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. At number 8, The 11th Hour. At number 7, The Girl Who Waited. At number 6, The Christmas Invasion. At number 5, The Angels Take Manhattan. At number 4, The End of Time Parts 1 and 2. And at number 3, The Name of the Doctor. And at number 2, The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. And now my number 1 pick is, of course, probably no big surprise, The Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary special. Hands down, best episode of the current series. I never thought it was possible that Stephen Moffat, being as good as he is, could actually write such a great episode featuring David Tennant and Matt Smith and John Hurt, including him as a incarnation of the Doctor, even though he doesn't call himself that in the Time War. It was brilliantly acted. It was just a trip down memory lane while heading towards the future. Fantastically done. As a final verdict, of course, well, as you know from my review, I gave this a 10 out of 10. And that's going to do it for now. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to comment down below and give me your top 10 episodes of Doctor Who. This video is now over, and be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall see you guys on the next one, and take care.